The whole Yasuke debate is just dumb. Ubisoft's recent announcement that the next Assassin's Creed game will give players a choice of 2 characters, Yasuke, a vassal of Oda Nobunaga, and a female shinobi, has set the internet on fire, prompting a massive backlash from commentators to streamers, mostly focused on the perceived tokenism at the heart of Ubisoft's decision to pick a black guy as the protagonist for a game set in feudal Japan, a place where the vast majority of people were native Japanese, in addition to the questionable identification of him as a samurai. Now, before I go into these claims, I'll preface this by saying I'm one of those guys who's usually very extreme about historical realism. It physically hurts my brain every time I see the Jada Pinkett Smiths of the world try to remake history with new shaders, or when Ridley Scott
How did you know where you're that?
releases a film. And Kingdom Come Deliverance is one of my favourite games because of its impressive commitment to historical accuracy. So when I say this Yasuke controversy is ridiculous, it's not because I'm obsessed with diversity, but because I'm obsessed with history. And I believe the sheer frenzy of opposition to Ubisoft's approach goes directly against the principles many claim to hold, but only seem to apply when a minority is the beneficiary of it. The main arguments against his inclusion seem to be that he was just thrown in without any good reason and didn't have much historical significance or relevance, and wasn't a samurai.
You're a phony!
Now, the first claim is just ridiculous because it sets a standard for historical fiction that would ruin the creative freedom of the industry if applied across the board. As Josh Sawyer, the acclaimed director of Pentiment and Fallout New Vegas, put it, historical fiction is all about playing around with history without actively going against it, not necessarily about picking the most probable outcome or the most popular and well-known one by audiences. And if this standard was suddenly changed so that historical fiction must only focus on that which likely happened and not that which could have happened, it would transform historical games as we know it and destroy the legacy of many renowned titles like Sawyer's Pentiment. Pentiment's premise was centered around an extremely rare proposition of a village with a still active double abbey and scriptorium. So if you apply the Yasuke standard just because niche history is apparently too woke, then you'd have to bring the rest of the industry with it. But the second argument, that Ubisoft is massaging real history into a shape that fits their agenda with Yasuke, takes a little bit more effort to disprove. First of all, let's start with the minimum standard Yasuke would need to be a believable protagonist in a historical fiction setting, connection to some of the key historical figures of that period, and presence at some of the main events. Well, with him, that's a pretty easy one to resolve. Thanks to, and I apologize for pronunciation, Shinko Koki, we know that soon after meeting him, Oda granted Yasuke a role in his entourage and an income as a vassal. The Koku writes that a black man was taken on as a vassal by Nobunaga-sama and received a stipend. His name was decided to be Yasuke. He was also given a short sword and a house. He was sometimes made to carry Nobunaga-sama's tools. We also know their relationship got to the point where Yasuke was favored by Nobunaga enough to accompany him personally on a tour of Kai province. The Jesuit Phrase writes regarding Yasuke that Nobunaga never tired of talking with him, and some people in town thought that he might make him a lord. And according to the Ietada diary of Matsudaira Ietada, when touring Kai, Nobunaga-sama was accompanied by a black man who was presented to him by the missionaries and to whom he gave a stipend. But more than this, we also know he played more than just a passive ceremonial role and was directly involved in one of the most important events in the time period, the Honnoji incident. This was where Akechi Mitsuhide, a general of Nobunaga, launched a surprise coup against him and his clan in the capital of Kyoto. Yasuke himself wasn't present at the attack on Nobunaga himself, but he is documented as having defended his son vociferously to the point of being captured. As Louis Farr, the Jesuit, again puts it, a black man who was a visitor sent to Nobunaga went to the house of Nobunaga's son after his death and was fighting for quite a long time. We also know from Farr that he was released from capture and remained at life at least 6 months after these events. So to me, it seems entirely plausible for him to have a clear personal motivation. But I'm sure you're thinking, what about the big question, the one on the internet's mind? Was Yasuke a samurai? Well, let's get stuck in, because things are a little complicated here. You see, the concept of samurai was not enshrined in a clear legal code until a much later period than the 1579 to early 1580s timeline of the game. As historian Jonathan Lopez Vera puts it in his book, History of the Samurai, Legendary Warriors of Japan, the term samurai originally stems from the word saburai, used to describe household servants of the Hainan Kyo nobility in the 8th century AD. Whereas professional warriors who were paid in service to a leader were instead referred to as bushi. Over time, as professional warriors entered into the service of Heian Kyo nobility, the name began to apply to them as well, but it wasn't until the unification of Japan in the late 16th century, after the events of the game, that a clear distinction between the term bushi and the now hereditary class of the samurai emerges. So it's not entirely clear by whose definition Yasuke was a samurai or not, because samurai was not a codified position in this period, and there is no clear historical consensus on the issue, without which you can't claim inaccuracy, only a difference of opinion. Like the classic saying goes, evidence of absence does not mean absence of evidence. But, and this is where my main frustration with the whole debate comes down to, the backlash against Yasuke was never about historical accuracy in the first place, simply because the history of Yasuke, whether samurai or not, meets a far higher standard than has ever been applied to any other Assassin's Creed game. It's a series that thrives on the implausible and downright impossible, and no one cared before now, before Yasuke. I can't remember an uproar over a random Native American lad called Connor unaliving George Lee when he actually died of a fever in real life, or a made-up noble from Florence eliminating Cesare Borgia and nearly knocking off his father, the bloody Pope. And that's without even going to the whole Izu plotline. So before you lose it,
it is done.
Just think, what's more believable? That a warrior we know fought ferociously to protect the family of Nobunaga in the wake of a momentous coup against them is out for revenge, or this? Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments if I'm right or wrong.